So let's get started. Welcome everyone to our first coffee chat of 2026. We are really excited to kick off this year, and we truly hope that you are too. I'm Pernilla Landigrafi. I'm the host of these sessions, and usually we also have a lot of PCMI team here with me, and Lindsay Lear, which is our practice leader, always joining us. Um, just before I start, I want to quick say thank you to everyone who took some time to reply our survey last year. That was incredibly helpful and actually helped us to shape a lot of the changes that we are introducing this year. So at its core, the main idea of the coffee chat remains the same. So this is an open space where we can share, we can discuss, we can learn together all the new trends in the payments industry with this amazing community that we have built. And so with that, we continue to encourage participation. Feel free to jump in, to add your perspective, make questions, comments. Really feel very welcome. And with that said, we do have few updates for this year. And the main one is that we will have some predetermined themes for all this for every session, right? So throughout the year, we will be focusing on our global payments megatrends. So these are trends that we truly believe that will be shaping the industry in 2026. We actually hold 3 webinars about this last month, and one was focused in the US, one in Latin America, and one in APAC. If you didn't have the opportunity to participate, that's fine, because today we are going to go through all of these trends again, just so you can have some familiarity and you can get to know the trends, have some context, and then starting next month, every session will be dedicated to one of these trends, right? So throughout the year, we will cover all of these with everything that is new, what's going on in the industry. We will have always a guest speaker, but also some consultant from PCMI will join to bring a little bit more context and also a bit of updates of what we are seeing in the industry. Okay, so as usual, before we started, we have our legal notice and then a couple of guidelines to ensure a successful meeting. I will ask you to open your cameras, make questions, comments, really participate. We truly, truly would love you to engage in the sessions. So really feel free to jump in. And second thing is just mind that we do publish this material online. So in our YouTube channel, we will see all the sessions. And also if you need to recover some content or material, we do post everything on our website. So feel free to go there and grab everything that you need. And to kick us off this year, we have this amazing PCMI team with me. So all of us will be talking a little bit about the trends that we are seeing in the payments industry. So guys, thank you so much for joining and for being here with us today. And Lindsay, you can start.
Okay, thank you, Fernanda. Hi, everyone. It is wonderful to see so many familiar faces, and I see many shining, beautiful smiles. Hi, Omar, Allison, Jimena. We've got a lot of familiar faces. So if I don't greet you personally, I see you all. And if you have your camera on, even better. I get to see your shining, beautiful faces. We love to see our coffee chat community back, and we're thrilled to kick this off. So if we go ahead. We're gonna walk through our mega trends today. Quickly, just do me a favor, guys, and throw your hands up in the chat with your little hands if you tuned into our either U.S. or Latin America webinar, Megatrends webinar a couple weeks ago. I see a lot of folks were able to see those, which that was great. I think. To me, this is some of our best and my favorite content that we've put out. And what we want to do today is give a chance to you guys to react to the content. We want to know which trends do you think are most interesting, most relevant? What are your predictions for these trends? Engaging with some of the hypotheses that we put out there. That's what our objective is today. So first off, I want to start with a quick poll. These are our 5 mega trends that we're tracking around the world, and then looking at how they are playing out in each region. So we're going to throw up a poll to start off. We want to know which of these trends is most relevant to you in your day-to-day job this year in 2026. Which of these is impacting you directly at the highest level? Okay. All right, we see them. I see the polls battling out. Let's see, pretty equal so far. All right, we've got about half of you answered. Give it another 20 seconds so that everyone can get their answer in. Let me, PCMI team, so Fernando, which is your prediction? Which trend do you predict is going to be most relevant to our group?
What do you mean to our group?
In our poll here, which
Oh.
one do you think is going to come out as number one, as most relevant?
I think maybe the cross-border.
Okay.
It can be one that's based on a couple of surveys that we have done with our audience. So maybe cross-border can be one of the most relevant.
Awesome. All right, let's wrap up. Almost everyone's responded here, so let's take a look and see what our survey says. All right, so I'm sharing results now. All right, so we've got multi-rail comes out on as number one. That makes sense for Latin America, right? This is a trend that is deeply entrenched and actively at play. Surprising to me is AI, because we view AI, agentic commerce or AI-enabled commerce, as a little bit behind in terms of actual deployment. But maybe you guys are going to enlighten us to something, to a new reality here. So thank you guys very much. Then we've got cross-border, B2B, and then acquiring being the last one. So fabulous. All right, and now we're going to do one other poll, similar but a little bit different. Which of these 5 trends is the most interesting to you personally? Okay, so irrespective of if you're dealing with it on a day-to-day basis, which one do you crave to learn more about at a personal level? All right, so this is kind of helping us, shape how we deliver content to you guys. All right, so Lau, what's your prediction for which one is going to come out on top here?
I think it's going to be AI.
Yeah. I would tend to agree. In every circle right now, I'm at the Merchant Risk Council conference in Las Vegas, and AI and agentic is, in the title of almost every panel discussion and every presentation. So, all right, take just about 10 more seconds, and we will wrap this one up. All right, I'm going to go ahead and share results. And there we have it. Lo and behold, AI is the number one most topic that is of most interest, followed closely by multi-rail. All right, so it looks like nobody cares about B2B payments. That is our topic for the next coffee chat. So hopefully that is still of interest to you guys somewhat. But this is great. Thank you very much for sharing. All right. Okay, so that was cool. That was fun. Thank you guys. So these are our 5 trends. And before we jump into the content, I want to take a moment to tell you guys how we're reframing how PCMI communicates with our audience. So if we go to the next slide, if you've been following us for a while, you may have noticed a difference in our content, in our presentation of our megatrends. We really wanted to continue our role of providing data and content and insight, but we don't want to end there. We don't want to just dump data on you guys and let you figure it out. What does this mean to you? Our role truly as consultants is to help you decipher that data and convert it into strategic steps you can take to drive revenue. At the end of the day, that's what we're all here for. We need to drive revenue. We need to make strategic decisions and execute. So our framing for this is, look, these are 6 very typical decisions or outcomes that anyone in the payments industry is looking for, from owning a product flywheel, being the rail, embedding in growth ecosystems, finding the right distribution partners, controlling economics, managing risk, right? Adding value beyond payments. These are just 6 very common objectives or outcomes that business leaders are looking for. And we map these outcomes to our own service lines. All right, so if we go one step ahead, we at PCMI, our primary role when we work with any client, and not even in a client engagement, in a coffee chat, in a webinar, in a discussion, in a conversation, our goal is to add value by helping you grow. Okay, so these are the outcomes that are somewhat related loosely to growth, and we have a whole set of solutions and frameworks and mindset to help you actually grow revenue, grow customers, grow lifetime value of your customers, grow transaction volume, grow market share, etc. Okay, you may be looking to measure, meaning I'm flying blind in this industry. I don't know how I'm compared to the rest of my community and my peers and my competitors. I need to find partners who are performing well. I need to understand which areas of the industry are growing so that I can bed myself. In that case, you might be looking to measure. I really need solid intelligence that helps me define how to move. And these are the outcomes you might be looking for if you're looking to measure. Okay. And then finally, you might be coming from a more protective mindset, and you might be looking to manage risk. This is really dependent on what your role in the organization or your role in the ecosystem. If you're facing a lot of digital disruption, regulatory disruption, you may need to manage risk, or you may be really focusing on the economics and making sure that you're protecting your margin. So we just want you guys to know that as we are presenting our view of what's going on in the industry, we're putting this strategic lens on things to help you navigate this turbulence and this chaos that we love and that we know you love, to help you, at the end of the day, make sense of it and feel more confident making actionable choices as you go throughout your week. Okay, so we're going to have that lens on this discussion. All right. So hopefully that is clear and adds some value to you just as we go through these trends. And we're going to attempt in the 45 minutes that remain to go through the trends, do a refresh, a very condensed version, and then open up the floor and hear how you guys are responding to some of the strategic questions we're throwing out there. All right. So we will begin with our most relevant trend, multi-rail world. And I'll have Valentina come on screen to begin. And again, at the end of each trend, we're going to open the floor. But if you guys have questions or comments, feel free, as always, to chime in. So we'll turn it over to you, Vale.
Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you, everyone. And I want to say that I love the results of the polls. So because I love this topic. And if you go in the next slide, I want to show you how this RTP war are going. So first, what we are seeing here with RTP, and Brazil is the best benchmark for this, is that not all players win in the same way. So if you see here some names, traditional banks like Itaú, Bradesco, Banco do Brasil have captured more direct economic value, retaining accounts, increased transition frequencies, and but the more structural shift is happening with new players. Vintage like Nubank, Mercado Pago, PagSeguro are not necessarily capturing more fees, but they are capturing something more valuable, as we see customers acquisitions, account primacy, and the ability to monetize through lending. So it's less about revenue right now, it's more about long-term strategic value. And if you look Colombia right now with Breve, we are starting to see the similar patterns. Just keep in mind that the most successful wallet are owned by banks, but there's a different discussion. But you can see that at first glance, you can see that wallets like Nequi and DaviPlata are very positioning to capture users, deposits, and eventually expand to credit. So the way that I see this snapshot is RTP doesn't eliminate value, it redistribute the value. So if we can go forward in the next slide, and I love the next slide because you can see better how the chief is going. So this slide is key because RTP are not just a new rail; it fundamentally reshapes the economies of the industry. So we are seeing a we are moving from a card-centric model where value was driven by interchange or transaction value, and the winners used to be issuers, networks, and acquirers. With the RTP, uh, we 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 shift to an account centric model. And why is that? Because transaction costs move close to zero, interoperability comes standard, and payments themselves become a commodity. So we value the value moves away from the transaction and into the balance sheet. Now the real value that we are seeing is in deposit, lendings, and the customer ownership. The customer ownership is really really key. But again, this is another discussion. And here, to close here, is the winner is no longer who processes the payment. The winner is who owns the account. And now to close this part of the multi-rate, I wanted to give you or leave you two strategic questions, if we can go to the next slide. And is uh first, how players position themselves as breve, escalate, and profit pool shift. And the second one is, what are the implications for APM growth and car dominance market? And I think the real question here is, are you positioned to capture that growth or to lose margin? And I want to leave you that question open.
All right, group. I know you're not going to be shy now. So, guys, this is our most interesting trend. This is our most relevant trend. So, I'd love to hear. These are two questions that we find to be very interesting, but maybe you have a different perspective. Tell us, what are, if anyone is in Colombia, how is Breve already playing out and impacting your daily life? If you're in a card dominated market like the US, or if you're in Central America and some of these things are just starting to bubble up, what are your impressions?
Yes, people are just shy. It's the first coffee chat.
I'm going to go to my old friend Bruno here.
I was going to unmute my
Oh, okay.
here as well.
I'm gonna pick on you because we know that yeah, you can take it. So Bruno, I think you're not quite as active in the space specifically anymore, but you come from Brazil, you know the environment very well. What are your high level thoughts here?
Uh, I have this misconception, and I keep hearing this and listening over and over, that like PIX becoming the standard for each and every country, and I don't think this is true. So, and I think, for example, I know it's not about PIX, but just taking this an example, because like looks like every country and every region can create their own PIX, like can have the same in Europe or in UK or whatever other country. But and the reality is that Brazil had the perfect storm for that to happen. The central bank, you have the power, the central authority of the central bank regulating and ruling out to the participants, like you will accept this. Like if you are big enough, you will accept this. But I know in other countries, like in Colombia, I think it's still, you have a lot of alternative payment methods and cards have a big participation, but banks are really strong. And you need to negotiate with a different ecosystem. So I understand that it's like lobbying from bigger companies and bigger brands like Visa, Mastercard, and others against UX and smaller costs and easier ways to pay from these countries to really find a middle term, and each one will create their own rails. And I think what I'm seeing here, the maturity, it differs from country to country as well. So not just the willingness to do something, but also how the bigger players, like the bigger the card schemes, they will understand, adapt, and accept that as well, because they are important in this environment. So it's not just as easy as in Brazil. The other countries and other players, they need to have their um, how they are not bleeding money out or just letting it go, because they have very strong lawyer firms advocating and lobbying, and this impacts a lot of the rules, the laws, and etc. So I think the biggest misconception here is to take Brazil as an example for everything, and PIX can become a reference for each and every country, which unfortunately is not true.
Very good, great point, Bruno. Pix is not the copy paste for everything. So I see hands. Allison, hi, good to see you. Jump on
Hi.
in.
Yeah, so I'll just compliment on that. So I'm based in Mexico, but I cover various countries in Latin America. And it is really interesting to see based on participation, the central bank, the players in the market. So when you look at something like PIX, you look at what's happening with Breve, everyone keeps asking, what happened with Mexico? Because didn't they have something like 10 years ago? Which is true. So it's like the perfect storm of participants. And without that, the market isn't going to move on APMs, but it is really interesting to see the speed with which each market's moving, based on the support that they have from the various players locally within the markets.
Allison, you just said something I want to repeat, and I want to make sure I understood you because I think is really important. That without it, and do you mean an RTP system, APMs are not going to scale? Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, so I think without
Yeah.
that system and without the right entities supporting it,
Yeah.
right?
I
So
think
because
there's
it
a
does it
very,
does exist in Mexico, but it's not well
it's
supported,
not scaled. It haven't
so it's
hasn't
not
been use cases
successful.
built on top, right? So I think
Exactly.
I hear this over and over, and it's really true that without, I think evidence has shown us that without, really easy low cost rails, cash remains, and you don't have the evolution of competition that is going to cannibalize cash. I think that's a very strong ethos and school of thought in Mexico and a lot of other countries in the region. Guys are so polite today. Let's go to Carlos.
Thank you. Yeah, and in fact, I was just about to compliment only what Bruno mentioned and Allison as well, because similar to Pix, it was created Cody in Mexico a few years back, and it's something that it hasn't just like explode like Pix in Brazil, and in fact, I believe that this is something related to also the adoption from the customers, from the consumers itself, because this specific rail it's using RTP and now it's trying just to be more like democratic in the use of the transactions in the countries, but it's not being like exploded in the same way. And in my perspective, and also adding into that the consumer adoption is not as agile that as is expected, probably that even the financial institutions now are using RTP as the way in which was used the wires, the high value payments in the past. Now all the clearing, whenever it's possible, is being used through RTP because it's like becoming more agile in the settlement of the transactions, and this is something that is changing dramatically the way in this how this is being like used elsewhere. And in fact, I have the opportunity to work with other regions, and in some cases, they are using still high value rails in order to do all the clearing transactions in the countries. And in Latin America, we're very well used to do it through RTP now, which is creating a very clear advantage against that other countries because the settlement is way quicker. So this is something important that I believe at some point it will be like start shifting all over the place. However, it's not being seen as that reason that we are seeing even wires currently as a specific rail still. So this is something that I believe it will change over time.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for that. Let's jump back. Fred, if you could go back one slide. I want to kind of, we're talking about how these schemes play out differently in different countries, and of course that's true. You know, there is a whole bunch of factors present in Brazil that made PIX explode in the way it did. But one thing I want to address is this comes up in Mexico quite a lot. Is CODI was built without economic incentives for banks, and some of the beliefs is that the reason RTP or SPE or CODI hasn't scaled in Mexico is that banks don't have an incentive. However, and there's a question, why are banks going to get involved in something where they earn less money on transactions than they do with cards? Because, of course, interchange is a big source of revenue for them. What we learned in Brazil and other RTP schemes around the world is that banks are motivated in a more long-term way by lending economics more so than card economics. And this is just a narrative to develop and to put out to banks if they're resistant to an RTP, if that's what we're trying to lobby for, right? So, the big banks that were already leading were winners in PIX because of being able to speed up transaction flows, actually maintain their deposits, even though there's fear of it, attrition to fintechs that actually didn't happen to the extent that we might think it happens. So being able to accumulate, preserve, and actually increase deposits and then move into lending is actually the long-term play of issuers in an RTP environment. And then when we look at Colombia, we see Bancolombia being the dominant player already in Breve, so doubling down its market presence. And then on that structural side, the fintechs that get, in addition, increased access to deposits and are able to even monetize that in a more innovative way is another way to think about this. So that's a way to understand why banks would be excited about participating in this and what is their long-term trade-off. Okay, maybe I'm going to sacrifice some interchange from cards, maybe, if that's the way the infrastructure develops. But long-term, I have a lending game, and that's what banks ultimately care about most of all, right? All right, let's move on.
Sorry, Lynn. I wanted to ask if we've got
Yeah,
anyone from the US to talk about A2A payments, because we spoke quite a bit in the North America Megatrends webinar, but yeah, have we got anyone based in the US willing to give their view on A2A in the country?
I'm scanning here. Who do we have? Thank you for bringing that up, Lau. Really important point. Got Marcia here. You have any view on that? She may be away from her computer. She's an RTP maven right here. So
Oh, so funny. It's instant payment maven. But
there you are.
I was just eating my lunch. But as far as like, so when we think out account to account, are you thinking just instant payments or just across? Because I know when people say account to account, I'm hearing all sorts of stuff. So it doesn't necessarily mean instant payments.
Yeah,
But
I mean, in the US, we're really framing it around Venmo, Cash App, and Zelle for retail payments. But of course, FedNow and other instant, I mean, that's a little bit on the infrastructure level. But all of these things are developing at the same time in the US.
yeah, I mean, so account to account is actually one of those great low risk use cases that financial institutions can deploy because that's a big friction point for everyone. You hear all those stories about, oh, I had to write myself a check and then do a mobile capture deposit to get money from one account into another account, right? And like you have a hot stock tip, like when the video is shooting up and people want to quickly move money into their investment accounts and they can't do that. Instant payments is a great tool, real-time payments, FedNow, whatever, to get that money in there. And we're starting to see the investment companies like putting instant payments on their roadmap. I can't remember who I was talking to the other day, but I don't know if it was like a Schwab or something that it's on their roadmap, but they're not anywhere close to implementing it yet. In the US, like we're so slow, receive only for most banks. The Fed and the clearinghouse are really pushing to get send adoption. The big hurdles with send adoption, part of it is, everybody's afraid of fraud. And I think I was at the clearinghouse, not the clearinghouse, the Faster Payments Council spring meeting, and they had a whole session on fraud. And a lot of banks are like, oh my gosh, we're going to expose ourselves to fraud if we adopt instant payments. But the problem is a lot of banks haven't been upgrading their security systems for a long time in the US. And that's not just a problem for instant payments, that's a problem across all payment types because
Ahora que me
um,
acuerdo, cuando estaba.
Oh, hang on.
yeah, it's a problem because we have these crazy stories about deep fakes, right? Deep fake technology. There's financial institutions are very exposed right now because they're behind. And so one of the things I've been, and I hope I try not. I'm on a slight. It's related, but it's a slight tangent. So I'm just going to say one more thing, and then I'll let it go back because I don't want to monopolize this. But one of the hurdles I think that may be a global challenge too is that um, financial institutions, their infrastructure is, they're trying to modernize in silos. And what everybody needs to do is put in a real-time data layer first, because everything you need to do with real-time security, real-time payments, everything needs that data layer across the enterprise footprint. Okay, that's my little like. Okay, I'm you can ask me more questions, but I'll try not to monopolize. So I'll step back.
No,
Can
that's
I
great.
jump
That's a
in?
great perspective.
Can I jump
Please.
in and say something relating to what several people have said? And if you want a system to work, you've got to look at every participant, and each participant needs to benefit from it. You were talking about banks make money on lending. That's how credit cards started in the first place. It was sold to the banks as lend more money. It wasn't sold as get some interchange fees. Um, but if a bank is making a lot of money on lending on credit cards, they're not going to want to change to something that's faster and easier. If the banks make money on holding cash, they're going to delay a real-time flow of funds out of their system. Similarly, you have the customer side. If the customer wants to do purchases with guarantees, they're going to use credit cards. If they're going to do transactions that speed is important, they'll do something else. So you have to really look at all the different participants, and merchants are part of that as well. So that's where Pix did such a good job. But for a lot of reasons, as you were all saying, there are a lot of aspects to that. And just to be aware, like you got to look out for that. Anyway.
Great. Thanks, Nick. Cool. Let's continue on here. I think we could have an entire session on this, and we will later in the year. But let's continue on. I think AI is our next discussion point.
Yes, AI is the next one. And well, as Valentina mentioned, I'm really glad that this also was highlighted in our polls, because I personally found this topic very, very interesting. So the topic is AI becoming the gateway to commerce, right? And we would like to start by exploring this maturity curve of consumer AI enabled shopping. And why we have this line is just because we need to have some clarity of where we are and where we are heading to, and actually look where each region or countries are and what's the next step, right? So the first phase here is AI assisted discovery, right? So consumers using ChatGPT or Google Gemini to search for products, or using chatbots to more in an exploratory way, but ultimately they need to go to the merchant website and pay in the merchant website like normal flow as we know, right? So here is where most consumers are today, and that includes Latin America. But then what we have seen is that in the US, the industry has actually laid the groundwork for phase two, and that's the most advanced phase that we have actually in place right now, which is the AI embedded checkout, right? So here, the consumers, they use the AI chat not just to search the product, but when they do search the product, they can buy in the AI interface. So they are not redirected to the merchant website anymore, right? So they search for the project, they click on buy, and then the payment is processed via an embedded PSP. But in this stage, the consumer still needs to confirm that transaction. So you need to click on buy, and the ultimate decision is yours, right? So here I have a couple of examples, like Stripe is enabling Shopify, PayPal, and here there are also a couple of merchants. They are enabling this checkout within ChatGPT or Google Gemini, for example. We put some examples here because it's not all merchants yet that have enabled this. If we'd like to take a guess, is about like 15% of the merchants. So it's something that it's starting, and not everybody's still familiar, but it's something that it's already in place in the US. And then we do have the third phase here that which we're talking about, agentic commerce, which is the hot topic, but still conceptual. So here is where AI monitors preference, inventory, and prices, and then they do the transactions autonomously, right? This, of course, the consumers can set some guardrails, but ultimately the AI do it autonomously. They're budgeting and they are choosing the payment method, right? Again, still conceptual, not in deployment yet, but we are building toward this capability. And what I want to do now is just like take this phase 2 and just go a little bit deep so we can understand the players and understand who is actually making money out of these transactions, right? So what do we have here? So now we have the AI chat app, which can be here ChatGPT, for example, and they control the user interface. Then we have the checkout owner surface, which is the player that provides the place to the consumer to check out. In this case, OpenAI embedded checkout, which controls the orchestration and ultimately the wallet selections that will fund that transaction. Then we have a third player, which is the identity wallet, right? So this is the identity layer that it's triggered by the email that you log into this AI interface. For example, so if I'm using ChatGPT and I log with my email, if I try to purchase something, all my details are pre-filled by this identity layer, which could be Apple Pay, Google Pay, or Stripe link. And ultimately, what they do is that they store card credentials, they manage the email identity, the address, and the payment credentials, right? And then, of course, we have the PSP and the acquire, which can be Stripe, Shopify, and they retrieve network token, do the authorization and the settlement. So what does it change from a normal flow, right? We do have the PSPs and the acquirers still taking their piece as they would in a traditional e-commerce flow. But now we have another player, which is the checkout owner surface, which is taking a piece of this e-commerce pie. So what we are seeing is that those big companies like OpenAI, for example, is now taking a little bit of this commerce word. So it's taking a piece of this commerce word, right? And that changed a little bit the configuration that we had previously. Interestingly, the identity wallet is still not charged any fees. It's just used as a consumer acquisition tool to navigate into new verticals. So basically what really changed is the checkout surface owner here, mainly the AI interface taking a piece of the pie. And the questions that we would like you to consider is, first, how quickly will AI shift from the discovery tool to the primary checkout tool, and in which categories that will happen first, and how can you benefit from this trend? And the second one, this is more related to Latin America, is that if will agentic commerce be built via card tokenization or wallet identity authority plus accountant alias?
And Fernanda, if I just can add a little bit more of context for the second question, because this is a short version of the full presentation. But just a quick comment. This question rises because we see in Latin America, specifically Brazil and PIX, right? And PIX already have some of the characteristics that is needed for agentic AI to flow. So this question is related to, since Pix already, we already have in Brazil embedded commerce in marketplaces, fintechs, banks, websites, right? We have push payment APIs. We have recurring payment methods and protocols already in place, and the open banking and payment initiation. With these four characteristics, it's the match of what we need for agentic AI, but not in this. It's not said in the same format that we are use it to see for card networks. So that's why we are putting this question for Latin America, but mostly thinking about Brazil and how this will be developed in Brazil specifically, in terms of, will this follow the card tokenization and flow as it's going globally, or it's going to be built together with Pix and the accounts based. Okay.
Yes, thank you, Mano. That's really important just to highlight here. So yeah, what's your thoughts about this? Do you have questions or any other perspective to add on this topic?
I do, actually. I have one. Could we go back a slide? Thank you. I think that we're in banking, and I think we need to be aware of, even if it's covered, we need to be aware of who is taking on the risk. We're in the business of security, and even if it's all really nicely done, we need to include that in the conversation.
100%. Yeah.
I mean, I don't have answers, but I'm just
that's the major, I believe, that's the major question merchants are asking. Okay, how do I know that an agent initiated transaction is valid? What are the rules? Who's going to decide who's liable? What are the protocols? That's absolutely an active conversation.
Yeah, but Nick, this part is still not the agentic, right? We are talking about the phase 2. So it's one step before the agentic commerce, right? So that's where we are now. But I agree, like the security part is the biggest discussion, and liability, right? Bruno?
I totally agree about it. Security is the first part, is the first layer, and the most important one to each company, that like, well, I'm enabling AI in my company, so like, what is the risk? Is the first question that every IT team asks. But following up on this, I don't think we'll be quick, but we'll be limited to tourism first. I think it's the biggest, the most common market, because you have packages. I want to go there, a hotel like 3 or 4 stars, whatever. So it's more guardrailed in a sense. So I think will be the first one, and companies like Despegar and other companies like that, they're already using heavily automation, AI, machine learning. So I think tourism is the first one. Then I also see for the major B2C markets will be smaller tickets purchases for commodities and regular like common products like toilet paper or whatever smaller tickets that you have that you need to buy every month. Yeah, you need to overthink that, because the risk is smaller, and people will like, I don't want to think about like the soap that is about to finish, or this or that, smaller things. So recurring purchases also. And for companies, I'm seeing a trend where when you have, for example, a checklist from purchase teams, or things that are very strict and they need to compare a lot of different vendors, this will be applied first for companies to purchase with AI, because in the end, like commodities, so they will pick the one that checks all the marks, and then you buy the less expensive one.
Yeah, totally. And one thing that I think it's really interesting that you mentioned about tourism is because one thing that we have seen is that the industry is expecting that the verticals that will be the first categories are the ones that we actually use human agents to support us, and travel is one of those. So you usually have some not very clear information, so you'll hire some travel agents to book your trip, and With AI, probably we're starting use agents in this industry where we also have some human agents to help us. So that's a very great insight, and I really like that, and I agree. Okay, so let's move to the next one. Cross-border with Miha.
Thank you. Thank you, Fer. Thank you, guys. So here, this is a very interesting topic that we already discussed in several webinars, also in our Megatrends session. And it's very interesting. If we start talking, when we start talking about what's going on in terms of cross-border in the region in Latin America, we will see that actually when we discuss about this, we were exploring the different alternatives, right? If we move forward to the next slide, we are gonna see that the main thing or the main question that we try to explore is which payment rail is likely to scale fastest in Latin America, particularly for intra-regional flows. So at a high level, what we see is there are three main pathways emerging in this aspect. And first, we have wallet interoperability, where large domestic wallets expand across borders through partnership and leveraging this large existing user base that they have. Second, we also have the interlinking of domestic real-time payment system. We already seen this very strong in Southeast Asia. Um, and what this allows actually a direct account-to-account cross-border transfer, which is really interesting. And in LATAM, what we have is systems like Pix, Breve, and Spay. As they mature, we think that this will become, and this is going to become like more realistic. It's going to become more realistic, right? Like as a possibility, as a chance to happen. And third, we have like this more like new kind of stablecoin based models which are already being used, right, in areas like remittances or treasury management. But the thing is that it remains fragmented, and it's subject still to regulatory uncertainty in most of the markets. So overall, the region is at the crossroads, and the key question is not whether this cross-border innovation will happen, but which of these Rails will ultimately scale and anchor the system. If we move forward to the next slide, we will see that, okay, we made this poll like a couple weeks ago in this webinar that we did about cross-border payments. And we asked our network what is the prediction about which rail is going to be scaling as it's going to scale fastest, right? Basically, the half of our audience believes or predicts that wallet interoperability will scale fast, right? Here in PCMI, what we have or what we develop is framework, a five-pillar framework to assess which of these rail is most likely to scale. So the framework actually looks at technical capability, regulatory support, bank alignment, consumer adoption, and the development of use cases to establish what's going to be the probability of faster scaling in terms of these rails, right? So this is mainly, I mean, this prediction about wallet interoperability is mainly because wallets already perform strongly across different and several of these pillars, right? And they benefit from high consumer adoption, increasing regulatory support, and a large existing user base that can be leveraged across even across border already doing that in a domestic way, right? So what we see is that these wallets actually stand out as the most immediately scalable pathway. So, and when we combine these, or when we combine the strategy that they are implementing with the smart partnerships that could actually enable the cross-border network expansion of these wallets. We mentioned three cases, three different models, but we have a fourth model that if we move forward to the next slide, this is going to be like a tier one bank on wallet model, which is something that we are starting seeing as a fourth emerging model. But the key question here is whether this just an isolated example, like the case that we are seeing about the situation of Jagge and Neki. So here, I mean, we can see if this can be actually replicated across the region, and this particularly is gonna matter, or is important to discuss about this because the main question here is, okay, who is controlling actually the cross-border orchestration and the liquidity, right? Is the one who's the one that actually is capturing the economics of the transaction? Because here, what we see about this new fourth model is that we are combining two things, right? First thing is the back-end strength of the traditional banking rails and the traditional banking infrastructure with the front-end experience of a modern wallet. So the question here is a bit controversial, but it's an important point that we need to highlight because this is allowing, or this might allow banks to retain control of the rails and the liquidity, and also competing more effectively on user experience, where actually these wallets stand out, right? So we are already seeing early example across the region, like we already mentioned, like the case of Match in Chile, Shop in Peru. Well, we have Davi Plata as well in Colombia, Shopee in Panama. These actually these wallets owned by these tier one banks, right? And this could also evolve into cross-border networks through bilateral, different multilateral agreements. Very similar to the situation that we've seen in Southeast Asia, right? As an example. So here, just to wrap up, the implication I think is clear. As these models continue evolving, the question is not just about which rails are scaling, right? But who owns the customer interface, the liquidity, and ultimately the economics of cross-border payments. And the strategic questions here to consider and to address would be two main, right? We have intra-regional flows growing and infrastructure fragmenting. So, which role do you think in the cross-border value chain should we deliberately choose, and where should we build? That's one of the questions. Um, the other thing is that as domestic real-time payments continue scaling in the US, which is the ecosystem that will define the future of cross-border in this case. So these are two interesting questions. I would like you guys to jump in and to express your opinions. So what do you think about cross-border as a very interesting topic, as a trend in this scenario?
Thanks, Miha. There's a lot there. Can we jump back one slide? So I want to make a clarification. And Allison brought this up in the chat. Just to,
Yeah.
I think we mistakenly skipped over the context here, but there was an announcement recently of interoperability between Yape and Neki in Colombia. And so that was the, and that's not shown here on the slide, but that's the premise of this. Oh, what if this model continues to scale around the region? So seeing the ability to send cross-border remittance from Yape to Neki, and that's kind of, going back to what our poll said. Oh, we think wallet interoperability will scale the first. So we're, beginning to see some traction there. Allison, I don't know if you had any thoughts there, or what that means to you, or what that might mean to anyone else on the call.
I think it's interesting because I think there was another comment in the chat earlier about trust, specifically in Mexico with financial institutions. And I think as we think about Latin America as a whole and as wallets grow, I think this helps also solve that problem where there's a lack of trust within financial institutions, but then within wallets, there's a lot more trust. And when you start talking about account to account, there's a lot more, you feel like you're more connected to what's happening with the payment versus with a financial institution where the trust has been broken for years and really hard to repair. So that's specific to Mexico, but I'm seeing it in other markets. Like I said, I cover various markets in Latin America, and seeing the growth of Neki, the growth of Yape, and now seeing them connected. I think that at least for cross-border transfers could be really interesting to see what.
Really interesting,
yeah.
Right? I like what you said there that consumers might trust these apps. It's a different story than sometimes we hear. Sometimes we hear that fintechs are less trustworthy, but it's true. Like you feel like you're more connected to the transaction, right? And probably the app is not your main account where you have all of your money. So you might have a smaller balance there that you use for specific transactions, and so that often gives you a little bit more confidence to experiment or make the transaction. So I like that insight.
Yeah, so like example, neki, people say in Colombia, like it's become a verb, like neki it to me, right? So not transfer,
Exactly.
neki it.
Exactly.
So
Venmo me is out. You're right. Exactly.
that shows this sort of trust level.
All
I
right.
have a question before you move on. So, because everybody's talking about stablecoin, but tokenized deposits isn't getting as much noise. And like the more I dig into tokenized deposits, the more practical they seem versus stablecoins because they're also using blockchain rails. They're also being converted from, your fiat into a token that gets routed across the ecosystem. Um, and and then the banks have more control over the funds, right? Because with stable coins, when you are purchasing stable coins, Circle or whoever your coin of choice is the one who's holding those deposits in their account. And I think there's some regulation, I should know this better, but there's some regulation recently passed, right, where you can have interest on your tokenized deposits, but you can't have interest on your stablecoin assets. So, have you guys been digging in at all to like the tokenized deposits, and what's your kind of take on that? Because I don't know also what the impact is from a cross-border perspective. Again, I'm still early on the
Yeah.
stablecoin. I'm pretty deep, but the tokenized deposits, I
Yeah,
know the
no,
little bit of my
to be honest,
journey.
it's an area we have not looked into. A lot of our clients are very, we have a lot of inquiries into stablecoin, but tokenized deposits, not so much. Mija, I don't know if you have a perspective here.
Yeah, I mean, there's still a topic that it's not that present, particularly in Latin America. There are a lot of like pilots and differentiation that I don't know. In the case of large banks like JP Morgan, they are like working a lot on that. But it's something that yeah, we are not seeing that much in Latin America. I've seen very recent like developments in like as I said, like the case of JP Morgan and the blockchain and tokenization platform that they have is very relevant. So yeah, but apart from that, it's difficult to see like that. I think that differentiation is a bit. It's a bit actually in early discussion, early stages of discussion. So yeah, that's basically what
It might
the
be worth a
information.
double click because it's totally under the radar right now, and it definitely needs to be raised. Somebody was asking me questions, and I just said what I assumed was correct, and then I went and researched to find out. I'm like, oh no, it wasn't what I thought it was. So,
It's
but
a lot of
they look
learning to
very,
do for sure.
yeah, they look very much alike. Tokenized deposits and stablecoin look very similar.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. Fair. I think I'll turn it over to you to wrap us up. I'm afraid we're not going to get
Yeah.
to our last two today, which is to be expected because we have such a fantastic group here. I know many of you are dropping, but I'll have Fair bring us home.
Yeah, just so you guys know, we were just missing one. The other one would be B2B payment, which is actually what we'll be discussing in our next session in April. So I just want to really go quick and just share that, well, not going to pass on this. I have a lot of content. Just to say that we'll see you next time in April. And if you can just have the time to point your cell phone here, we have a LinkedIn group where we share the next topics, or we share also other events that we are covering. So if you want to join, that would be really great to have you there.
All right. Thank
Okay.
you, everyone. Thanks to
Thank you,
PCMI team.
everyone.
Thanks, Fair. See you guys very soon. Thank you.